Hey everyone, welcome to the latest episode of the SaaS Sessions podcast. Today I'm thrilled to welcome Max Altschuler on the show. Everyone, I think, knows Max already, but for those of you who don't, Max is the founder and general partner at GTMfund, and he's widely recognized as a pioneer in modern sales and go-to-market strategies. Right? He was the founder of Sales Hacker, which was a leading community of next-gen sales professionals which was later acquired by Outreach, where he served as the vice president of marketing there and played a very pivotal role in scaling the company to over $300 million in ARR, right? So he's also an investor, advisor, and a great keynote speaker with deep expertise in building high growth SaaS businesses. So, hey, Max, such a pleasure to have you in the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
All right. I gave a very short intro, Max, but I'm sure there's a lot more, and I know you keep talking about your journey a lot on LinkedIn. But can you share more about your journey in SaaS world, right? Like how did that happen?
Yeah, graduated college. Actually started a bike share program in college. I would have
Mm.
been the first one in the U.S. Fortunately, it failed because it would have been an insurance nightmare, and
Mm.
ended up getting a job at a company called Udemy,
Mm.
early education marketplace. Let's see, I joined at the seed stage to do their seed A and B rounds of funding. But I
Uh-huh.
joined as the person in charge of building the instructor side of the platform, the
Mm.
sales side of the platform. And we did some really hacky stuff to grow quickly on the sales side of that marketplace. We built a virtual assistant team in the Philippines that acted as our sales development reps, built out a bunch of if-then statements and copy for them to use in the process, was an early customer of ToutApp, which was one of the first sales engagement platforms. And then we also built web scrapers to scrape kind of best-selling books. So we knew to go reach out to those authors to teach courses on those topics.
Mm.
Uh, and yeah, it was growing quickly. Other founders and VCs would ask our founders and VCs what we were doing to grow so quickly. They'd put them in touch with me. Turned out there were a lot of people interested in kind of what we were calling sales hacking,
Mm.
and so that led to kind of some meetups, which led to our first conference in 2013. I ended up running the SaaStr annual for Jason Lemkin in 2000. I think we did our first one in 2014, 15.
Mm.
So did the first two events of that. Ran Sales Hacker, which was our media company, large scale conferences, publication, consulting, training for 5 years, and then sold the company to Outreach and joined as VP of marketing. Did 25 to 250 million in revenue in 4 years, which is a great run. Learned a ton. Being in the business, was also an early investor in
Right.
Outreach, and the idea for GTM Fund came from that time running my media company. When I was running the media company, I had a great cash flowing business, but not a high upside business, meaning I couldn't sell it for, what SaaS companies were selling for, like, the 20x multiples on revenue that you get when a SaaS company gets acquired. And so my way of diversifying was putting my cash flow into early stage investments into software companies. So coincidentally, my first check as an investor was into Outreach, pre-seed $3 million
Mm.
valuation. Most recent valuation, 4.4 billion, was early in Gong, Carbon Health, Drift, Bombora,
Mm.
all the good ones. And my speakers and attendees and sponsors and folks who become friends of mine that were GTM leaders at other companies, CROs, CMOs, you name it, would say the same thing to me. Hey, how do I diversify? Because when you're the CRO at a company, all of your equity is tied up in that company's success, and you
Mm.
may not have full control over that company's success. You're the CRO, you sell the product, but you're not the head. You're not the head of product. You're not in charge of what the economy might do, or space might do, or what competitors might do. So you're not that in control, and so you can end up working somewhere for 4 years and make very little
Mm.
money on it. And so you do want to diversify. You want to have eggs in different baskets, equity in different companies. You want to develop a robust kind of angel investor and advisory, um,
Mm.
you know, basket of assets essentially. So I took that idea, put it in my back pocket, and then 2021, AngelList came out with rolling funds,
Mm.
democratizing venture capital, allowing anybody to raise and deploy capital as long as you can do so. And we said, okay, what if we started the GTM fund and raised $1 million from 20 to 50 of my GTM leader friends and put that into 10 companies and could positively affect the outcome of those companies by supporting them with all things go to market. And it went gangbusters. We ended up raising 22 million in fund one, which was 2021, 2022, 54 million in fund two, which was across 23, 24, and 25. So that one closed at the end of last year. We're still deploying that one. And we got about 300 LPs now. We're all VP, C level,
Nice.
sales, marketing, customer success leaders from proven SaaS companies. And every one of those LPs acts as a node for deal flow, diligence, portfolio company support, candidate placement,
Mm.
customers, help, whatever we need. So um, it's been great. It's been a lot of fun. Certainly love helping founders. It's a huge passion of mine. Certainly love working with a community of kind of proven GTM leaders that a lot of them have become friends over the years. Built a great team internally and doing some really cool stuff. So so far so good. So far so good. But yeah, still keeping my roots attached to all things B2B SaaS, which is where I grew up in the game.
Nice, nice. That's a very interesting journey, right? And a great position where you are at today, right? Like helping whatever you learned throughout the years, like your successes, your failures, your mistakes, and and not only you, right? Because you are like one operator, in one company, right? But there is like, as you mentioned, 300 LPs, right? And all of these are operators at different companies. So like the plethora of insights and learnings that one can amass, like by just being in touch with your partnering up with GTM Fund. I think it's invaluable as of today, right? Like, because I think we are in the stage where everybody or anybody can build, right, with the help of AI, but distribution will always be something that people will have to spend more time thinking on rather than building, right? Like, because that will be key now. And GTM is like one of the key things of distribution, right? Like, how do you think and strategize and execute, and lots of moving parts there, right? But Max, I think you mentioned you were an early investor in Outreach at 3 million. When they raised that, right? So what? And I think at that stage, like it was. I don't think it was like a relatively known company as it is today, and in a new category as well. Then, so what initially attracted you to Outreach as an early stage investor, right? Like, what did you see in the team, and what convinced you to write that check?
Yeah, well, we're early stage investors, and I've always been early stage. I like it. I think,
Mm,
we are investing oftentimes pre spreadsheet, means pre
mm,
burn, pre revenue, oftentimes where you're making almost 100% a founder bet on the
mm,
business. And it has to be a founder bet, also has to be a space bet. Like for us, if we're going to invest, we like to use the surfer analogy, which is, you can have the best surfer in the world, which is the founder, the best board in the world, which is the product. But if you don't have a wave, you can't go anywhere. So we do
mm,
care about, the space that it's in and what the inflection, points are that are driving that space to grow over the coming years and is going to power the entrepreneur forward, propel the entrepreneur forward. Um, but then everything beyond that is the founder bet, and I like to
mm,
invest in people I consider as absolute machines, like
mm,
someone who is always on, who is lives, breathes, eats, sleeps their business, and genuinely cares about like this is all they care about. This is what they want to do. Um, I've invested in Manny Medina twice now. The first time when it was the outreach investment. I met him
mm,
for coffee in Union Square in San Francisco. It was the first time I ever met him. I knew a lot about the space
mm,
because I had started a media company in it, wrote a book on it called Hacking Sales. But
mm,
met Manny, and in 30 minutes, I knew that this is somebody I wanted to invest in. I knew
mm,
that they're an absolute machine. They're going to run through walls. They're going to, figure this thing out. They're going to hire great people. They are going to recruit, um, sell this thing on their own. Even if they didn't know how to sell, they'd figure it out. And they were going to build a great product. And I like the way that
mm,
they were going about building the product. When I talked to a lot of companies at that time, um, nobody was talking to customers as much as Manny and his team were, and nobody was kind of
mm,
ingesting it the way that they were. I loved his background. He was one of the few people in the space with a product background, and ultimately just all the things added up to be a hell yeah for that business. It's funny. I
Mm,
have a story around it where I had just become an accredited investor. I was early in my career. I think it was like 25, 26 or something like that at the time.
mm,
Um, and I called my dad, who's a financial advisor, and he's my financial advisor, and he's an entrepreneur in his own right, but he has a one man shop that he runs
mm,
out of where I grew up. And I just called him and said, "Hey, I met this guy, Manny Medina. He's doing something in the space that I know very well. I'm gonna write an angel check." And my dad's reaction was like, "That's so stupid. Like those early investments, you're just gonna lose your money, blah blah." Like the classic financial advisor would say.
mm,
And I was kind of like, "Well, I agree. Like these are very risky. I get it. It's a risky investment, but I know this space better than anybody on the planet. I literally run a media company in it, a sales
mm,
technology. I wrote a book on it called Hacking Sales that was
mm,
I self-published and was picked up by Wiley. I really do know this space better than most. So, like, I think he's going to be successful. And then, secondly, like, I think I'm a pretty good judge of character. Like,
mm,
I don't know. I asked my dad, like, would you consider me a pretty good judge of character? And he said, yeah, I think that's like, something you excel at. So I said, okay, then what do I have to lose here? And by the end
mm.
of the phone call, he was like, okay, I'll match the investment. Like, whatever you put in, I want to put in. I was like, okay, I guess I convinced you. And then Manny and him met, a couple months later at one of my conferences, and they had a good chat. And Manny was like, "I promise you, I'll be one of your best investments." And so,
Mm,
um, yeah, he ended up being one of the best investments. I mean, 3 million to 4.4 billion is pretty good.
right.
So my dad was pretty happy there, and that worked out. But there's a lot of things you look for. I mean, when I look back on
Mm,
even joining Udemy very early on, an immigrant founder
mm,
is an interesting, I guess, like characteristic or data point. But these you look at Aaron Bali, who's been helping support his family since he's old enough to
mm,
walk or something like that. Amit Bendal is another one, like at Gong, like they're like 3 for 3 on Manny, Amit, and Aaron right there, right? So like I think there's certain things that that type of characteristic has to overcome just to survive. So like
mm,
they're going to be good founders, right? Not every time, not 100% of the time, but you're always looking
mm,
for some kind of pattern recognition as much as you possibly can in investments, especially the early
right.
stage.
Very, I think a very, very interesting story, right? And like a sales hacker and outreach, right? Like very good combination because in some way, as you said, right, through sales hacker, you already knew the space better than anyone else. You already have a sort of distribution already built for, the same audience that outreach was kind of targeting or going to target, right? So, like what sort of unique value did you think that sales hacker could bring to outreach, right?
Hmm.
And how did you envision, like, hey, integrating these two brands like would be the best, right? Because outreach was your first investment, and you were running sales hacker, which is literally for sales people and which is also outreach. So did it happen because of these two things unite for you and you felt like, hey, it can be a good partnership play, it can be like good integration between the two things that you have now, right? Like, an investment in a company which sell to sales leaders and a distribution channel of all the sales leaders which are out there, right? So
Yeah.
what sort of unique value do you think that sales hacker brought to outreach?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I wanted to be somewhere where I still had a lot of upside, where the value
Mm,
of the business can grow meaningfully, and then I also wanted to be somewhere where I felt like I could make an impact. Wasn't a huge company, um, I could be a real player in the business. And with
mm,
outreach, I already had a relationship with Manny and a lot of the team. I came in and, was able to be kind of the CEO's right hand man. Like I had so much access in that business. It was fantastic. And I was able to make a very, very meaningful impact on
mm,
that business. Um, so much to the tune of like we had just forecasted our year down right when they made the acquisition and we actually ended up beating the original number. So like crushed our numbers after the sales hacker acquisition. We
Mm.
spoke to HubSpot somewhat deeply, LinkedIn as well, a couple other companies, but I had this relationship with Manny. It made total sense. They were the leader in the
Mm.
space. They raised the most money, and we're starting to break out. From a revenue trajectory, at a very compelling rate. So, it made total sense. And at the same time, they had a great product org, great
Mm.
sales org, and I think they were trying to figure out a lot around marketing and owning the space. And there were some other vendors that were the inverse. Like marketing was really good, but sales wasn't that great or product wasn't that great. And so for me, sliding
Mm.
into outreach made the most sense because it felt like I was the missing piece. And so I went
Mm.
to Unleash, which was their conference that year, and Manny and I
Right.
spoke. I said, "What keeps you up at night?" They just raised a Series D. I said, "Congrats on the Series D. What keeps you up at night?" And he said, "Marketing." And I said, "Well, I
Mm.
run, the media company in the space. Like, I know how to do marketing. You got best in class sales software. You know how to do the product side. Sales is going well. Like, how to sell. Like, if we do this, and I come in and run marketing, this makes a lot of sense."
Mm.
And worked out the numbers and closed a deal from like first conversation to deal closed about 3 months.
Nice. That's fast. That's
Fast-ish. Not when you're in it. It's slow when
totally.
you're in it, you know?
Yeah.
But we already had the relationship and all the other stuff. So like from first
Mm.
conversation to deal close was mainly about hammering out the numbers, making sure
Mm.
all the kind of loose ends were tied up, and especially in our business, like they need to do their diligence, make sure we don't have like any crazy outstanding debt or lawsuits or
Mm.
other things like that. And we didn't, but like, it takes time for them to do all the work. So
Right.
it was cool. It was cool to see the kind of inner workings of that, learn about it, and then at Outreach, I was on the other side of it when we acquired companies. So
Mm.
it's cool to kind of see from all angles.
Yeah. So was that like was selling sales hacker to outreach the like the biggest and greatest sale of your life then?
Yeah, yeah, you could say that. I mean, certainly from an economic standpoint, yes, and um, yes, certainly from an
Yeah.
economic standpoint.
Yeah. And if you
Uh,
think of
yeah, Udemy, like I
mm.
closed our first um, deal with our like a publisher. So and then I
Mm.
brought on Pearson, O'Reilly, and Wiley. I also closed our first deal with like a private university.
Mm.
It was University of Cincinnati. Um,
Mm.
so maybe it was a public university, but it was our first deal with the university in general. So like those are pretty big deals at the time, and had a lot more stakeholders because like they were massive organizations. With outreach, it was definitely the biggest deal for me personally and like
Mm.
economically. Um, from a stakeholder standpoint, um, you know, I certainly had to sell the entire executive team and
Mm.
legal and finance. Um, but yeah, I just ran it as another deal, and
Yeah.
it worked out.
Nice. I think in many sales days, like building the trust and building the relationship. I think those are all which takes a lot of time. I think were pretty much sorted or done for you because of your early relationship with outreach in many ways, right? So, and you directly entered the deal in the just talking numbers, negotiation, and then what happens next point of view, right? Like I think
And
that
like
accelerated.
when you're in like a big deal, like a life changing deal, this type of stuff, like I don't know what the wisdom is, with
Mm.
the Ray Dalio, Warren Buffett books and stuff like that. And I've done like a lot of I read a lot of the sales books, negotiation books, and things. I think like build trust early, um, and no games are like the biggest things on
Mm.
either side. Like it's not just about the deal; it's about the
Mm.
working relationship you're going to have with
Right.
these people. And like the worst thing you could do is play games and then get caught in like you're going to try some crazy negotiation tactic and then you get caught in a bluff or something like that that could blow up
Mm.
your deal. Like it's not worth it. And early in the negotiation process, Manny was like, "All right, we're gonna issue you an LOI. Um, And, at that point, like, you can't shop the deal.
Mm.
And I was like, listen, fair, but if everything checks out, we're going to get it done fast. We're going to like
Mm.
have a short LOI window. And um, from a negotiation standpoint, like, I won't shop the deal, but like, here's what I want. Don't give me an
Mm.
LOI if we can't get near that number.
Right.
And we like we were kind of like, okay, cool. Like came in at a slightly lower number. I said, no, this is where I need to be.
Mm.
We met closer to like where my number was, and everybody was happy. And I also
Nice.
like wasn't asking for some like I didn't start at some like ridiculously egregious number. Like
Mm.
I think when like you go into some of these deals, like there's a value that could be assigned to a business when you're like trying to sell it strictly to somebody who's like buying the revenue.
Mm.
And they're going to value the business on EBITDA, revenue, whatever that multiple is. And that's just what it's
Mm.
going to be. They're buying you for the revenue. They're buying you to like merge the business in and like that revenue is meaningful. That's what it's going to be. In my business, it was like, no, what you're buying is the like our ability to compound your value.
Mm.
And you're not buying us for like our revenue, any of that kind of stuff. Actually, you don't care about our revenue, really. Like
Right.
what is the couple $1 million on the media company when they're trying to like grow the SaaS revenue from 50 to 100 million, right? Like, so
Right.
then it's market value. It's like,
Mm.
here's what I think I'm worth, and here's what the market thinks I'm worth. And, if you're not willing to pay that, like somebody else will. So
Mm.
you come up, with a price based on that. It's like, what am I willing to sell this business for? And is there
Mm.
anybody out there that's probably willing to buy me for something in that range? And the answer was
Mm.
yes. We knew that, so like
Mm.
I knew what LinkedIn and HubSpot were going to offer. I knew what outreach could afford. I knew I wanted to do mostly stock because I wanted to participate in the upside of outreach,
Right.
and we were able to work out a deal pretty quickly.
That's great. And I think it's a very great integration play for both, right? Like for sales hacker as well as outreach, and then now you grow into the VP of marketing role at outreach, and you come and say like, hey, I'll solve marketing for you, right? So how did you leverage in that sense, right? Like I know there's tons of talks about using a lot of GTM strategies from a marketing point of view. Like, and I'm sure you have covered in a lot of your conversations already. And but something new I want to know, right? Like, given the conversation, so how did you leverage Sales Hacker particularly to accelerate Outreach's GTM strategy, right?
Yeah,
And their GTM efforts, keeping in mind that obviously Sales Hacker is now owned by Outreach, but you cannot just blast Outreach to like everyone there, right? Because it's
yeah,
still a community, and you need to be mindful of that. So I know I remember like I've been a member of that, since 2019 during my time at Whatfix. So I've been following the Sales Hacker community since then, and I did see like hey, the acquisition happened, post acquisition, like I never saw, or I never felt like, hey, this community is owned by Outreach. Like, even though it was owned, I didn't see like, all blasts of just seeing like one brand out there, right? So you
yeah.
have to balance that. So how did you leverage the community for the Outreach's GTM efforts?
Yeah, what I loved about Manny is that he agreed that like outreach would be our gift to the community, and like we wouldn't go and cannibalize that because we would one piss off I think a lot of the sales community,
Mm.
which was the whole like it'd be anti the point of the acquisition, and
Mm.
two, I don't actually think it gets you anywhere. So what we did was we said, okay, for at least the first year, nothing changes. We want to make
Mm.
sure we keep the trust of all our community members so that they stay and that they stay involved. And if anything, it just gets better. We have more budget now. We can hire,
Mm.
top talent. We can put more money into events, things like that. Um, so we didn't change anything.
Mm.
There was always a hard wall between sales hacker and outreach. So even the CRMs were different, meaning like reps couldn't just go into sales hackers database and send somebody an email like, hey, I see you're a sales hacker member, come try outreach. Not possible. What
Mm.
we did do was we ran more programs and initiatives through the media company for outreach than any other sponsor. So instead of having 2 webinars a year, maybe they had 4. We also were able to create content on the media side of the business that was like pro outreaches value prop.
Mm.
So it's like why companies need to invest in X, Y, and Z and build the category not necessarily focus on the company. And then we did a lot around category creation. So it
Mm,
has less to do with Sales Hacker, but the category we were creating was the sales engagement category. We went out and bought the salesengagement.com domain name.
mm,
A consultant had that domain, and I never met him before. And I was like, hey, I want to buy this and I want to put our, a book and our podcast that we're creating on this. And he was like, well, it's not for sale. I've already done a lot of work, blah, blah, blah. And I offered him some money. He's like, it's not really interested in me. And what I offered him that he couldn't get anywhere else was I offered him 2 webinars on Sales Hacker with a massive audience. And I said, listen, like, I know you're not interested in like a couple tens of thousands of dollars, but I can
mm,
actually help you make hundreds of thousands of dollars in business by putting you on a pedestal in front of this audience. So we
mm,
actually ended up trading him very little cash, but mostly webinars and access to the audience on Sales Hacker in
mm,
exchange for the website. And then I contacted my point of contact at Wiley and said, hey, we're writing the book on sales engagement. I wrote one for them on hacking sales. So we had the book coming out at our conference. 6 months later, we launched the Sales Engagement podcast on salesengagement.com. So it all is category creation stuff. And we use saleshacker.com to push a lot of the sales engagement category
mm,
creation stuff because it wasn't solely focused on outreach. So we grew the category that way. Um, and then, we had 2 podcasts. We had the Sales Hacker podcast and the Sales Engagement podcast. The Sales Engagement one was lower viewership, more in the weeds content. And so we were able to get, like directors of RevOps, directors of sales development or sales enablement on that show. But if we wanted like a big time CRO and we wanted
mm,
to engage with them in a sales cycle, we'd get them on the Sales Hacker podcast. And it was our way of delivering
mm,
value to someone before selling to them. So, you can go to Chris Degnan, CRO of Snowflake, who's a customer. And if you want to get access to that level and they're not picking up the phone, to be sold to, you can
mm.
be like, hey, I have a podcast that gets, 20,000
Right.
downloads per episode that I can put you on. That'll perk their ears up and get you in a conversation with them. And when you're having the prep call and the conversation for the podcast, you can also start to develop the relationship on the selling side.
Mm,
So we did use our podcasts often as a Trojan horse to build a relationship and provide
right.
value for someone before asking for, them to be involved in a deal cycle.
I think using that strategy, like I use that a lot at Whatfix as well, where we invited chief learning officers. We are selling a digital adoption product, so we invited chief learning officers of Fortune 500 companies to come on the podcast, right? And we had a similar, like, digitaladoption.com, right? Like where we were using that to build our category, or we build what fits into the category. And we didn't portray, like, or we didn't put blast out, like, or put stickers of what fits everywhere on the show, but it was the same strategy, right? And it worked for us as well. I think it's a great play where my sales teams were focused on trying to get a meeting with the director and the VP, and here I am, like, we have a podcast scheduled with them, like with the chief learning officer, who's the chief executive, in 2 weeks, right? And the sales people are
Yeah.
like, dude, what? We're trying so hard to get a meeting, but then we have a podcast recording with that person, right? So I think it's a great play, and I think it still works even today. I've seen a lot of companies keep doing it. So very interesting. So, Max, I think looking back, right, of this journey, right? So, are there any key decisions or key things that you would approach differently if you had the chance to do it?
I mean, there's acquisitions I think we would have made at Outreach that we should have done earlier.
Mm,
Uh, those are probably the main things. I think we were very much a build in house over a buy
mm,
organization, but I just think that it takes too long sometimes with the pace of technology adoption to do that. I also think there's like a time in history where a lot of these companies were very cheap and then they got very
mm,
expensive. Um, and like the timing just didn't work out for us. Like things got really expensive right when we needed them to be cheap. Uh,
mm,
so like everybody was rocketing and growing during the COVID years, and the spend
mm,
was crazy, and companies got very expensive then. And like we were just big enough at that time to like go on a buying spree. So it's like,
mm,
oh man, it would have been nicer if we were able to take advantage of that, in 2019 instead of trying to do it late 2020, 2021. But
mm,
um, so I'd say like that's probably the main thing is, we knew we wanted to participate in the gong space, call recording, revenue
mm,
intelligence, and just, took too long to get there. I think, for me personally, like I wish Outreach would have gotten to the data game. They should have been competing with Zoom Info and the like, on the data side of the business. And, we were kind of trying to figure out one business at a time.
mm,
So, you could only do so much. And then we
mm,
never had a self serve product. I think that's probably the third mistake. And all of these are product related mistakes. I don't
mm,
think we made a ton of mistakes on the sales and marketing side of the business. Um, we did. We probably did get stuck on, what we call crack, like the SMBs of the world.
mm,
And if you're ever short on your number, like you can always close a bunch of SMB customers, and that like works until it doesn't.
mm,
Then you have a reckoning like 2022, and you'll just bleed a lot
right.
of you'll have a lot of churn with the SMB.
Mm,
And you really need, if you're going to do that, you really need self serve, and you really need like a low tier product, because
mm,
for all the churn you'll ideally have like more gain in seats and more gain in customers. So like look at Apollo. Like Apollo is a good example of this.
mm,
Um, so yeah, I think there's more on the product side of things than sales or marketing. Yeah.
interesting. I think we are on time as well, so I'll maybe ask like one last thing before we move on to the lightning round, right? So a lot of successes as you shared, right? Like many success stories, and I think recently now you mentioned a few failures as well, and I'm sure there's many more things that you would change, right, or do differently if you got the chance to do it, right? So uh, top of the space, top of the category, fastest growing company, biggest like community of salespeople. So, you're at the top of the helm, right? Literally. So, how did this experience for you, at Outreach and Sales Hacker, like shape your perspective overall on building, and building and leading high growth SaaS companies, which now helps you today at GTM Fund, right? When you look at companies.
Yeah. Um, I'd say that over the years, I've definitely improved on my leadership, and um, grown up just in general. I mean, when
Mm,
I started Sales Hacker, I was in my mid 20s. Now I'm in my late 30s.
mm,
So it's just like, you know, you're gonna mature. You're gonna recognize things you didn't recognize before. Remember my first month at Outreach, the head of HR pulled me aside, and he was like, "Hey, you're sending emails at like all hours. You're always on, and that's great. That's how you like to work, and you're getting a ton done. But when you send those emails, like the team gets them, and they think they have to respond to them immediately. They think they have to be on when you're on." And
mm,
I had to send an email to the team. It's like, "Hey, do as I say, not as I do." Like, if I send you something, I'll mark it as urgent if it's urgent. If not, and like you get it at 10 p.m. on a Saturday night or whatever it is, you don't have to get back to me till like Monday.
mm,
It's fine. It's all right. I think I like to hire people who are naturally always on,
mm,
and um are high agency, and just like get a ton done. And I still have to remind people like, hey, if I send this email, I don't need 3 paragraph answer. I might like need one sentence. It's a quick response, or I don't need it urgently. You can get to it on Monday or whatever it is. But
mm,
I really enjoy what I do. I really enjoy
mm,
it. And when I have downtime, I sometimes I work. And I have 3 kids, and I spend a lot of time with them. But when I'm not spending time with them, like
mm,
maybe other people like to watch Game of Thrones or play Settlers of Catan or whatever it is. Like
mm,
I'd rather get work done. Like I'd rather get stuff
mm,
done. And I'm always tinkering around with things. Like if I have like I have special projects all the time where I'm just like, all right, in my downtime, I'm gonna go figure out how to like turn every process I can in the business into AI. using either an out
Mm.
of box solution or like custom build.
Mm.
Okay, cool. Like I just like that. So I don't
Mm.
know. I mean, in some ways, I think it makes me hard to beat. In other ways, I'm a little bit of a sicko, and that's fine with me as long as I hire well and set the guidelines and don't burn my team out.
Totally, totally. Great. I think that's a good perspective that you have, right? Like it's either hard to beat you or people
Yeah,
just think you're sick, working every time.
yeah.
But great insights, Max. And let's move on to the lightning round. And I have three more questions for you, which again, as the name of the round suggests, like you have to answer quickly what is top of your mind. So, Max, like let's the first one, right? So, what's the one thing, Max, that has helped you shorten your learning curve?
Hmm. Shorten my learning curve. I'm a big learner by doing. For
Hmm.
me, like it's hard for me to learn, watching a video or listening to some like instructions or something like that, or reading.
Hmm.
I just have to dig in.
Hmm.
So, um, fortunately, I've been able to do that when I get the opportunity to.
Hmm.
A lot of these GPT AI things have helped a lot. Cursor,
Hmm.
etc. Like, you could do more with less understanding. And so, but for me, it's just jump in, start trying, start doing, and you get the hang of it.
Nice, nice. On to the second one, right? So, what do you know about your work now that you wish you would have known when you first started?
Um, the biggest game changer for me was like paying up for headcount.
Hmm.
And when I first started, I don't know, I just didn't have the money to do it, but it was very
Hmm.
short sighted. Like I should have understood that if you hire the best people, you'll like the money will appear
Hmm.
almost. And so I think like that's an area to splurge. That's like never skimp, never sacrifice, don't be lazy.
Hmm.
And now I feel like I have an incredible team around me, and we pay them very well. They're compensated very well, and it's just a massive unlock. Like
Hmm.
it's the one thing I kick myself on for not doing earlier. I think like my first splurge of a hire was a guy named Gaetano for Sales Hacker, and
Hmm.
like he just opened up a ton for me, and um and I've always prided myself on like when I hire someone, I bring them in, I try to like almost like hire someone who is gifted,
Hmm.
exceptional, has high motor, all that kind of stuff, but like is junior for the job, like more on the junior side. Like they have to like reach. And if you do that and you do it right, you end up reaping the benefits of it, but also like they'll grow so much under you that like Gaetano's job before I got him was I think he was like a SEO individual contributor at Pipedrive, and
Hmm.
then his job after I had him, he was like a VP of demand gen at a similar sized company, Nextiva. And
Hmm.
like his compensation, I think maybe 3 or 4x or something like that, probably 3x
Nice.
in like a
Hmm.
year and a half. And on the one hand, I hired him, I put him in that position, um, and all that. On the other hand, he crushed it and he earned it. And I think if we
Hmm.
put people in that position, like everybody wins.
Hmm. Nice, nice. I think that's something good to have always. Uh, on the last one, right? So, given your unique vantage point, Max, as a operator, investor, community builder, and maybe like an hyperactive doer, right? So, what's your one advice to founders who are building today?
Um, One advice to founders who are building today, I mean, like an amazing time to build because there's so many resources
Hmm.
available to you, both from like a been there, done that standpoint, but also from like a technology standpoint. If you were building in 2015, there were like a handful, like Disaster just like was just getting started. There weren't a lot of other like media entities that were telling you like how to do these things, and then there was
Hmm.
nothing like a Cursor. Now all of a
Yeah.
sudden you have Cursor, you have all these other tools at your disposal, Vercel, whatever, and then you also have all these resources where you have
Hmm.
like interviews upon interviews from people who've like been there, done that. So
Hmm.
leverage it. It's the best time ever to build is today, and the best time ever to build tomorrow will be tomorrow, and like it's only gonna get better from here.
Hmm. Nice. Yeah, I think just be, super obsessed about things that you want to build, you truly care about, as you said earlier, right? And then just build, and maybe that's gonna earn them some partnership from GTM Fund. All
Yeah,
right. So great to have you, Max, and thanks for taking time and sharing all these amazing insights and your journey and all these learning, success, failures, right? Like I think it's very insightful and very valuable to everybody who's listening.
awesome. Thanks for having me, Sunil.